There are people who dread the words, "Can I come over?" Not because they dislike you, because their home is sacred. You'll find them making excuses, suggesting coffee shops instead, feeling their chest tighten when someone shows up unannounced, the doorbell, the footsteps, the invasion. They aren't rude or cold or unfriendly. They're protective of something the world doesn't understand, something that feels more like boundary than barrier. But here's what nobody talks about. Even they feel guilty about it. They watch friends host effortlessly and wonder what's broken in them, because society says your home should always have an open door. The truth lives in that impossible tension between hospitality and self-preservation. Every guest feels like an intrusion into their nervous system's safe zone. Psychologists talk about environmental control and how crucial it is for certain temperaments. It's not about the person visiting, it's about how their brain experiences home itself. Home isn't just a location, it's where their guard finally drops, where they exist without performance or observation, where every object sits exactly where their nervous system expects it. Researchers studying anxiety describe this as territorial sensitivity. Their home is an extension of their internal state. When someone enters, it's not just physical space being shared, it's psychological space being invaded. What looks like inhospitality is actually a desperate need to protect the one place where they can fully decompress. Here's the paradox that creates shame. They can love someone deeply and still hate having them in their space. They can be generous, kind, socially engaged people who feel physical discomfort at the thought of hosting. They want to be the friend who throws dinner parties. They want to feel relaxed when people visit. But instead, there's this tightness, this hyper-awareness. Are they judging my clutter? Can they see the dust? Is the temperature okay? Should I offer more food? The ancient brain screams, your sanctuary is compromised. The modern brain whispers, you're a terrible friend. If you've ever deep cleaned before someone visits, then felt exhausted before they even arrived, you know this conflict, the tension between who you want to be and what your body actually feels. We live in a culture that romanticizes the open home, the friend who always hosts, the house where everyone gathers, Southern hospitality, come over any time. Researchers studying social norms find that hosting ability is tied to perceived warmth and generosity. Those who don't host get quietly labeled antisocial, selfish, unwelcoming. But what if that entire framework misses something crucial? What if some nervous systems genuinely need their home to remain an unpenetrated refuge? Scientists studying introversion and sensitivity find that environmental control directly impacts mental health for certain individuals. What if protecting your space isn't about rejecting people, but about preserving the one place where you can actually recover enough to show up for people elsewhere? What if it's not coldness, but clarity about what you need to function? This pattern often begins in childhood. Maybe they grew up in a chaotic home where privacy didn't exist, where their room was never truly theirs, where boundaries were constantly violated. So they learned early home must be controlled because nothing else can be. Or perhaps it started differently, a sensitive child in an unpredictable environment who discovered that arranging their space just so created an illusion of safety. Over time, that need crystallized into identity, the friend who suggests meeting out, the one whose home remains mysterious. Some psychologists trace this to attachment patterns and early boundary violations. Others point to temperamental predisposition toward environmental sensitivity. Likely both. A nervous system learning that home equals safety only when it remains unshared. Not from meanness, from survival. But here's the truth beneath the guilt. People who protect their home space often possess a depth of self-awareness others might lack. They've learned what their nervous system requires to function. Their boundary isn't weakness, it's wisdom. They know that to show up fully in the world, they need a place that remains entirely theirs. Research on boundaries shows that people with clear environmental limits often have healthier relationships. They're not people-pleasing or overextending. They're honest about their capacity. Their home is where they refuel, where they process, where they exist without accommodation. That's not selfishness, that's self-knowledge. But, and this matters, the gift exists when it's choice, not prison, when they're protecting something sacred, not hiding from something scary. The difference is everything about whether this serves them or traps them. Psychologists call it the hospitality avoidance cycle. It begins when the discomfort of hosting transitions from preference to phobia, when having someone over shifts from "I'd rather not" to "I absolutely cannot." The pattern tightens. Someone asks to visit, anxiety spikes, they make an excuse, and relief floods in. That relief reinforces the avoidance. Soon their tolerance shrinks. The thought alone triggers panic. They imagine worst-case scenarios, their stuff being judged, awkward silence, not knowing how to end the visit. Their home becomes a fortress, but fortresses feel safe only until they realize they're also prisons. The space that should liberate starts to isolate. Instead of "I prefer meeting elsewhere," it becomes "I'm terrified of anyone seeing where I live." That's when protection becomes pathology, when boundary becomes barrier. In ancient times, your dwelling was survival, a cave, a shelter, the place where you were most vulnerable during sleep and rest. Protecting it made sense. Controlling who entered determined safety. That instinct remains embedded, but the modern world complicates it. Now, homes are supposed to be performance spaces, Instagram-worthy, always guest-ready. The pressure to host is also pressure to curate, to present a version of domestic life that looks effortless. But what if rejecting that pressure isn't dysfunction? What if it's discernment? They're not antisocial, they're resisting the mandate that their private space must also be public-facing, that rest space must double as performance space. It's a quiet rebellion against the idea that true friendship requires access to all areas, that intimacy means physical proximity rather than emotional honesty. The path forward isn't forcing themselves to host dinner parties. It's understanding whether their boundary serves them or suffocates them. Therapists recommend gradual exposure when it's fear-based. Start small. One trusted person, 30 minutes, low stakes. That might mean inviting someone over for coffee, not dinner. Allowing imperfection, not deep cleaning first. Practicing the discomfort of being seen in their actual environment. It means asking, am I protecting my peace or am I avoiding intimacy? Am I honoring a genuine need or am I controlled by anxiety? The answers matter. If it's preference, honor it fully. If it's fear, address it gently. The goal isn't becoming someone who loves hosting, it's becoming someone who chooses freely, who can tolerate occasional guests without panic, while maintaining the right to prefer solitude. Why does having guests trigger such visceral discomfort? Because home represents the unedited self, the place where they don't perform, where dishes sit in the sink, where laundry piles up, where they exist in their most natural, unpolished state. When someone enters, they're not just seeing the space, they're seeing the truth the world doesn't usually witness. Every social interaction requires curation. They manage their presentation, choose their words carefully, monitor their expressions. Home is where that exhausting performance ends. It's not about the physical mess, it's about the psychological nakedness. Having someone in their space feels like being watched while they sleep, observed in their most vulnerable state. This is why their resistance isn't about the person, it's about preserving the last refuge where they can exist completely unobserved, where truth doesn't need translation or presentation. Here's what others miss. People who protect their home often show up differently everywhere else. They meet you fully in neutral spaces because they've preserved their recovery zone.
They're not stretched thin from constant hosting obligations. Their friendship isn't measured in open doors, but in opened hearts. When they do invite you in, and some eventually do for chosen few, it means something profound. It's not casual, it's sacred trust. They've decided you're worth the vulnerability of being seen in their natural habitat. Social butterflies host everyone. These individuals might host once, but it carries the weight of true intimacy. They've learned that connection doesn't require surrendering your sanctuary, that you can love people deeply without giving them unlimited access to your private world.
The people who hate having guests over aren't broken or selfish. They're honoring a boundary most people don't even know they need. They've learned that their home isn't a gathering space, it's a recovery space. And that's not just okay, it's wise. They're discovering they can be loving, generous friends without opening their door, can maintain deep connections while protecting their sanctuary, can choose when and how to share their space without guilt. The path forward isn't becoming a host, it's becoming free. Free to protect what needs protecting while staying open to growth when fear tries to decide. When they finally do let someone in, if they do, it's from choice, not obligation, from trust, not pressure, from wholeness, not performance. That's not coldness, that's consciousness. That's not rejecting people, that's respecting their own needs enough to meet others authentically.